So, you finally did it. You hit the number. You retired at 42. Congratulations. You are now the most miserable person at the farmer's market on a Tuesday. And I know that sounds wrong, because the whole point of retiring early was the freedom, right? No alarm clocks, no Dave in accounting sending reply all emails about the broken coffee machine, no performance reviews where someone reads adjectives about you from a piece of paper like that is a normal thing adults do to each other. You did everything right. You saved aggressively. You lived below your means. You found the fire blogs, ran the numbers, hit your target, and walked out the door. You were supposed to be happy. Here's the thing about early retirement that nobody in the fire community puts in their calculator. The math is not what breaks people. The math is actually the easy part. What breaks people is everything that was never on the spreadsheet in the first place. And I am not talking about sequence of returns risk or healthcare costs before Medicare, though we are absolutely going to talk about those because they will make your face do something you will not enjoy. I am talking about the stuff that hits you at 11 in the morning on a random Wednesday when you realize you have nowhere to be and nothing that actually needs you. By the end of this video, you are going to understand 3 hidden costs of early retirement that the success story blogs never mention: identity loss, the boredom tax, and the 40-year inflation problem that turns your carefully calculated number into a rounding error. These are not soft, feelings-based objections. They are real, measurable, and they have sent a staggering number of very smart people back to jobs they swore they would never return to. Let's get into it. Here is something nobody says out loud at the fire meetups. High achievers do not just have jobs. They are their jobs. And when you retire early, you do not just lose the income. You lose the answer to the most common question adults ask each other. What do you do? When you are 43 and your answer is, nothing, I retired, half the room thinks you are lying, and the other half quietly resents you. And then you go home, and you realize that question was doing a lot more work for your sense of self than you ever gave it credit for. There is actual research on this. Studies on early retirees consistently show spikes in anxiety and depression in the first 2 years after leaving work. Not because they ran out of money, because the structure is gone. The daily rhythm, the problems that needed solving, the people who needed things from you, all of it evaporates at once. And what is left is a wide-open calendar that feels less like freedom and more like a waiting room with no appointment coming. Think of your career like a load-bearing wall. You look at it and think, I do not want this wall here anymore. I want an open floor plan. This wall is ruining my life. So you knock it out. And then the ceiling falls on you. Because that wall was not just a wall. It was holding something up. Your career holds up a lot of things you did not notice until they were gone. Status, routine, social contact. The feeling that your time has value because someone is paying for it. A reason to get dressed before noon. And here is the uncomfortable part. The things people replace it with, golf, travel, finally reading all those books, optimizing the portfolio, those are hobbies, not identities. Golf is not a personality. Neither is tracking your asset allocation on a Tuesday morning instead of a Sunday night. The dopamine hit fades fast, and then you are just a person with a lot of free time and a growing sense that something is missing, and you cannot quite name it because you are not supposed to admit this is hard. The people who crash hardest are usually the ones who were most driven before retirement, because the same intensity that built the portfolio is still running in the background with nowhere useful to go. It does not turn off. It just starts looking for problems to solve, and when it cannot find real ones, it manufactures them. You start over-managing your investments. You start having strong opinions about the layout of your garage. You start 3 different podcasts and finish none of them. You become, and I say this with love, a lot to deal with. Retiring early without a clear second-act identity is not freedom. It is just unemployment with a better savings rate and a story you have to keep explaining at dinner parties. The fix is not complicated, but it does require admitting something that the fire community is not great at admitting. The goal is not to stop working. The goal is to stop working on things you do not care about. Those are completely different problems, and only one of them has a spreadsheet solution. So the identity thing is real. But let's say you solve it. Let's say you find your thing. You still have to survive the part nobody actually warns you about, the grinding, creeping, expensive boredom that moves in like an uninvited roommate and immediately starts costing you money. Let's talk about the boredom tax, because boredom in early retirement is not just a mood, it is a line item. It shows up in your bank statement, and it is not small. Here's how it goes. Month 1 of retirement feels incredible. You sleep in. You make a real breakfast on a Wednesday. You go for a walk in the middle of the day and feel like you are getting away with something. This is it. This is the life. Month 3, you have watched everything on Netflix worth watching. You have reorganized the garage twice. You have started going to the gym at 10 in the morning, which you enjoy mostly because it makes you feel smarter than the people who go at 6. Month 6? Month 6 feels like a prison sentence you designed yourself, paid for yourself, and cannot complain about because you technically chose it. Everyone around you is going to work. They have meetings to hate, deadlines to stress about, coworkers to passive-aggressively email. They are annoyed, but they are engaged. You are sitting in your perfectly optimized home wondering why the freedom you engineered feels strangely hollow. And here is where it gets expensive. When humans are bored, they spend money. Not because they are irresponsible, because stimulation costs money, and your brain will find a way to buy it whether you budgeted for it or not. You start traveling more than your plan accounted for. You pick up hobbies, which sounds harmless until you price out what hobbies actually cost. I am talking about the guy, and you know this guy, maybe you are this guy, who retired early with a solid plan, and then discovered woodworking. Just a little hobby, a creative outlet, very zen. 18 months later, he has a fully equipped workshop, a humidity-controlled lumber storage situation, and a running tab that has cleared $40,000. He has made 4 cutting boards and a wobbly stool. The stool is not level. He is already looking at a lathe. That is the boredom tax. It is real, and it compounds. And then there is the social dimension, which hits differently than most people expect. Your friends are still working. They still talk about work things. The project, the promotion, the office politics drama that you used to find exhausting, but now, honestly, sounds kind of interesting just because it is something happening to someone. You are on the outside of a game everyone else is still playing, and you start to feel it, that low-grade sense of disconnection that is hard to name but easy to spend your way around. Here is the data point that should make every early retirement enthusiast uncomfortable. A significant portion of early retirees return to some form of paid work within 3 years. Not because they went broke, because they were bored, isolated, and spending at a rate that surprised them. Their number was right. Their budget was right. The math said they were fine, but they forgot to budget for the thing humans do when they have too much unstructured time and not enough reasons to get out of the house. Boredom is not a character flaw. It is not a sign that you are ungrateful or that you did not save enough, or that you are secretly a workaholic who cannot relax. It is a completely predictable psychological response to the removal of structure, purpose, and social accountability. 3 things your job was quietly providing for free while you were busy being annoyed at it. The problem is, it is invisible on a spreadsheet, so nobody puts it in the calculator. And then they act surprised when the number that worked on paper does not quite work in practice. Boredom is a budget line item you forgot to include, and it is probably bigger than you think. Okay, so we have got identity and boredom. 2 very human, very expensive problems. Now, let's talk about the one that is purely mathematical and somehow still gets ignored by people who are supposedly good at math. What 40 years of inflation actually does to your number. Here is the thing about fire math that nobody puts in the headline. Most of the models, the calculators, the blog posts, the forum threads, they are built around a 25 to 30-year retirement, which makes sense if you retire at 65. But if you retire at 45, you are not running a 30-year model. You are running a 45-year model, maybe 50. And that gap is not a rounding error. That gap is the whole ballgame. Let's run the actual numbers. The 4% rule, the one everyone in the FIRE community treats like scripture, was built on research from the 90s studying 30-year retirement windows. The original study looked at historical market data and said, roughly, if you pull 4% of your portfolio per year, you will probably not run out of money over 30 years. That is what it said. 30 years, not 45, not 50, 30. So if you retire at 45 with $1 million and pull 4%, that is $40,000 a year. Fine. Except you are now asking that math to hold up until you are 95. And the original model was not designed to do that. Some updated research suggests that for a 45-year window, the safe withdrawal rate drops closer to 3%, maybe 3.5%, which on $1 million is $30,000 to $35,000 a year. Before taxes, before healthcare, before the boredom tax we just talked about. And then there is sequence of returns risk, which sounds technical, but is actually just one of the most brutal things that can happen to a portfolio. Here's how it works. If you retire and the market drops hard in year 1 or year 2, you are selling assets at the bottom to fund your living expenses. Those shares are gone. They cannot recover because you spent them. The portfolio never fully heals. A bad sequence of returns in the first 5 years of a retirement can permanently cripple a portfolio that would have been just fine if the same returns had come in a different order. Timing matters enormously, and you cannot control it. Now add healthcare. If you retire before 65, you are not eligible for Medicare. That means you are buying individual health insurance on the open market for yourself and potentially your family for up to 20 years. Price that out right now for a family of 3. Go look at what a decent individual plan actually costs before Medicare kicks in. It is not pretty. Depending on where you live, you could be looking at $1,500 to $2,000 a month in premiums alone. Before deductibles, before out-of-pocket costs, before anything actually goes wrong with anyone's health. Over 20 years. That is a number that makes your carefully calculated retirement budget look optimistic in a way that is genuinely uncomfortable. And here is the part people always forget about late retirement spending. There is a pattern researchers call the spending smile. Early in retirement, you spend more. Travel, experiences, all the things you were saving for. Then spending dips in your mid-retirement years when you slow down a bit. Then it spikes again after 75, because healthcare costs explode. The smile shape. Most early retirement models only account for the first curve and completely miss the third one. The difference between retiring at 45 versus 55 is not just 10 years of living expenses, though that alone is significant. It is 10 more years of compounding you walked away from. It is 10 more years of contributions. It is a meaningfully higher safe withdrawal rate. It is potentially hundreds of thousands of dollars in lifetime wealth. You traded for a decade of freedom you may have spent mostly bored and anxious. Your number is probably not your number. It is your number times 1.5, minimum. And that is, before we talk about what most people actually do wrong before they ever get to the math. So the math is scarier than the blogs make it look. But here is the part that really gets me. Most of the people who regret retiring early saw some version of these warning signs coming. They knew the identity question was going to be weird. They had a nagging feeling their number might be a little thin. They had heard about healthcare costs. And they retired anyway, because they were so locked in on hitting the finish line that they stopped asking what was actually on the other side of it. That is the finish line fallacy, and it is everywhere in the FIRE community. Here is what it looks like. You start treating retirement as the goal itself instead of a tool for building a better life. You optimize obsessively for the escape. You track your number, you run the projections, you post updates on the forums, you get the dopamine hit every time the portfolio ticks up. Retirement becomes the destination, and everything else, what you will actually do, who you will be, what your Tuesday at 2 in the afternoon looks like, that is future you's problem. Current you is focused on the number, and the FIRE community has a serious marketing problem here that nobody really talks about. Every story that gets shared, every blog post that goes viral, every podcast interview, it is always the guy who retired at 38. The guy who hit 1.2 million at 40 and walked away and never looked back. That is the content. That is the brand. Nobody posts about the guy who retired at 41, spent 2 years quietly unraveling, and went back to work at 43 with a revised understanding of himself and a slightly depleted portfolio. That story exists. It exists a lot. You just never see it because it does not make a good headline and nobody is exactly rushing to write that blog post. That is survivorship bias, working directly against you. You are building your retirement plan based on the people for whom it worked, which makes it look like it always works. It does not always work. The failure rate is just invisible. And then there is the version of this that is maybe the most relatable and also the most dangerous. Some people do not retire 1 year too early out of bad math. They retire 1 year too early out of spite. Pure, unfiltered, I cannot spend one more day in this building spite. They are not retiring towards something. They are ejecting from something. The boss is insufferable. The commute is soul-destroying. The open plan office is a fluorescent-lit sensory nightmare and someone keeps microwaving fish at 11 in the morning. I did not retire because I loved freedom. I retired because Dave in accounting sent one too many reply-all emails about the parking garage validation policy. And look, I understand that impulse completely, but spite is not a retirement plan. Spite gets you out the door. It does not tell you what to do once you are standing in the parking lot. Here is the one thing I have noticed consistently about the people who actually thrive in early retirement, the ones who genuinely do not regret it, the ones who figured it out. They did not retire away from something. They retired toward something. They had a clear, specific, honest answer to the question of what their life was actually going to look like. Not travel more. That is not an answer. An actual answer, a project, a purpose, a community, a second act that had enough structure and meaning to replace what work was quietly providing. If you cannot answer, what am I retiring toward, with something concrete and genuinely energizing, you are not ready. It does not matter what the spreadsheet says. It does not matter if you hit your number last Tuesday. You are not ready. And retiring anyway does not make you brave. It just makes the reckoning more expensive. Here is what I want you to see, because this is where the whole thing clicks. These are not 4 separate problems. They are one problem running in a loop. Identity loss creates anxiety. Anxiety creates boredom spending. Boredom spending breaks the math. Broken math creates panic. Panic sends people back to work. And then the fire forums never hear about it, which means the next person makes the same mistakes with the same confidence. But the loop runs the other way too. And this is the actually useful part. Someone who solves the identity problem before they retire spends less out of boredom, because they have structure and purpose that does not require a credit card. Less boredom spending means the math actually holds up. Math that holds up means no panic. No panic means they never have to go back to a job they hated. The psychological problem and the financial problem are the same problem. Fix one and you're fixing both. The real target was never work again. It was never have to work again. That is a completely different optimization problem. One is about escape. The other is about building something worth staying in. Smart people regret retiring early because they applied smart people logic to a human problem. And humans are not spreadsheets. The variables that matter most, purpose, identity, structure, meaning, do not fit in a cell. Before you set a retirement date, do 3 things. Audit your identity before you audit your portfolio. Write down what a Tuesday at 2 in the afternoon actually looks like in your retired life. Specifically, not vaguely. And recalculate your number using a 45-year timeline with real healthcare costs built in. If those answers are solid, the math has a real shot. And if you want to learn the retirement lie nobody admits until it's too late, watch this next video.